I'm Bethany, and that's Drew.
St. Louis, Missouri, the gateway to the West, is a beer town. You can see the city's reputation in the grain silos and the beer empire signs littered throughout.
But what most people don't see are the underground workings that make the unique beers of St. Louis possible.
Come with us as we explore some of these underground lagering chambers, right here on Oddity Odysseys. We are headed to Earthbound Beer, and they have tapped into 150 years of St. Louis brewing history.
Earthbound Beer can be found off of I-55 in South St. Louis. Exit at Arsenal Street and head west about half a mile. Turn left on Iowa Avenue and continue another half mile to Cherokee Street. The address is 2724 Cherokee Street. But before we go there, we do want to drive by to see the famous Lemp Brewery building, which happens to be on the way.
It happens to be right in front of us. Look at this.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. I want to go in there. Maybe next time. It is closed to the public. They used to do an annual haunted house.
Really cheesy.
Fun attraction. Today we're going to see something a little bit more authentic. But we had to at least mention the Lemp Brewery because it is integral to the history of beer production in St. Louis.
Adam Lemp arrived in St. Louis from Germany in 1838. Working in the grocery business, manufacturing vinegar and beer, Lemp quickly discovered that the key to producing some of the world's best beer was utilizing the naturally climate-controlled caves underneath the city.
Missouri is home to over 6,400 caves, with around 50 of these caves located within St. Louis itself. Lemp and other brewers realized the cold and dark spaces were the best resource for perfecting their craft. And it was not uncommon for a brewery to be established near an entrance to one of these caves.
Now, with the proliferation of artificial refrigeration in the early 1900s, many of these entrances were sealed off. But there's one brewery right down the street from Lemp that still utilizes this underground cavern system. Welcome to Earthbound Beer.
So what I do love about this space is that when you walk in, there's a couple different levels. You can order from this spot over here. And I'm in love with this logo, the Earthbound logo. You can see from their list, they're trying new things all the time. They're doing a rotation of taps. So they have a pecan chicory stout, which I think we are going to try later. So this has been a brewery since 2014. So from 2014 to 2017, they kind of revamped the space to go back to its roots of being a brewery like it was in the 1800s.
Exactly.
Gonna play some
pinball.
I don't think they had these in the 1800s, but this is a nice touch.
It is.
We modernized it a little bit. They're kind of getting the bar open. It is a normal day, so we are here to just kind of meet everybody and see what the place is all about. Earthbound was once Cherokee Brewing Stockhouse, which officially opened to the public for tours as a museum in the 1950s. The main attraction was the million-year-old natural limestone cave that could be explored for $1 admission. So this is Stuart, the owner of Earthbound Beer, and this is Merlin, the other owner of Earthbound Beer. And what I love is there's a lot of creativity when you walk into this space. It doesn't look like your normal brewery or dive bar.
Right, it doesn't look like your normal brewery, but that's really funny because this was originally a brewery. And then it was a grocery store, it was a shoe store, a furniture store, a tienda, and then a bodega, and then we turned it back into a brewery.
So it went back to its origin story.
Yeah, it did.
Essentially.
Yeah. And so we opened Earthbound Beer back in 2014, and we opened in a 1,000-square-foot hallway right down the street. And we wanted to make experimental beer. We wanted to really focus on stuff you couldn't find anywhere else. And then in 2015, we decided to expand, and we started working on this building, and we fell in love with the building, and we opened it in 2017. So when we took the building over, there was a plaster and lath dome ceiling in here, a drop ceiling. It was in the shape of a dome. We took that down. We uncovered all this great architectural detailing, and we wanted to show it off. So we built this mezzanine that's suspended out into the center of the room. It's a really interesting way to interact with the space. You have this nice big public area down here. You have a semi-private area upstairs. It's just a really fun way to do things.
You get a little bit of everything.
Get a little bit of everything, yeah.
So speaking of experimental beer, what has been your favorite one that actually worked?
Oh, my favorite one that actually worked. Probably the most interesting one, the one that I was most excited about, because it was an idea I had really early on. The first recorded history of brewing in Bavaria was tomb findings from 800 BC. It was these Celtic kings, I guess. It was some tomb, and they found these potsherds that had residue on it that they identified as beer, and they said it was a black wheat beer that had been seasoned with oak leaves. And we're like, well, how would you make a beer like that? How would you make a beer that was drinkable? How would you use oak leaves? There's no information about it.
Right.
So we went and picked a bunch of young oak leaves. We made an oak leaf tea out of it, and we made this beer that was really dark and really almost drank like a sour beer, even though it wasn't a sour beer, and it had this really wonderful like young oak character to it.
One of a kind.
Yes, very one of a kind.
So speaking of kind of the creation of your beer, can we kind of see a little bit more of the,
Sure, yeah,
the workings? We're going to get a special sneak peek underground, which I'm very excited about. We're going into the underground.
That's right. So yeah, we brew our beer up here for the production side of things. So this is a 7-barrel brew house. We make beer 200 some odd gallons at a time. It's really small. We're a rounding error to even like a lot of commercial microbreweries. But that's how we like it. We like to make really small batch beer. We like to do really weird stuff. After it's done boiling, we bring it down through a heat exchanger and down into the basement, and that's where we'll go next.
I think whenever someone is enjoying a beer, they don't think about what goes into it, the process.
It's a crazy process.
It's the craftsmanship.
We basically have these big fermenters are just giant aquariums for microorganisms.
Right.
And they live through generations, like civilizations rise and fall, and then they all die out and we drink the byproduct, right? We're like drinking like used aquarium water.
We don't put that on the posters out front, but yeah, we don't.
No, it's just the whole thing is weird, and the more you think about it, the weirder it gets.
So I guess what you're saying, don't think about it, just enjoy the beer.
Or do think about it and just change your perspective on reality. So yeah, the beer from upstairs comes down some stainless steel pipes to these fermenters down here, and we are now on the Earthbound beer production floor, and it is a very large basement, one of several. The reason that we have a big basement like this is in the 1800s, they didn't have these stainless steel fermenters that have temperature control on them, and they needed to keep the beer at a certain temperature. In the 1800s, this was a big sinkhole that was full of water, and it was a big pasture that a lot of cows drank at. So we have all this really good agricultural soil, and when it gets wet and it compacts, it turns into clay.
Right.
So what you have in St. Louis is a city made out of bricks because we had so much clay, right? Every plot of land, if it had a sinkhole in it, was a big storehouse of clay. So somebody bought this land, and they drained out all the water from the cattle pond that was here, and they started taking the clay and turning it into bricks, and they worked down and down and down, basically made a big quarry, and eventually they had a big rectangular hole in the ground, and they sold that to a brewery who built up from underneath. And that's how you end up with a big dumb hole in the ground like this.
That's where this came from. So should St. Louis be dubbed a beer town?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Okay,
So-
'cause I've heard that it's called many things, right? Gateway to the West, and people say it should be called also Cave Town and Beer Town.
Anheuser-Busch and Lemp right down the street here, they're actually part of the same cave system that we're currently in. They really had not just mastered the art of making beer, but they had figured out the supply chain management to really dominate the beer market. So Anheuser-Busch and Lemp created the entire system for which beer was manufactured and consumed in the 20th century, for better or
So they
worse.
built the engine and
Yeah.
they drove it while drinking a beer.
Yes, and it was all. I mean, it's if you think about it as like not just a technology but a culture, like the culture of mass market brews, the culture of like that really heavy advertising, all Anheuser-Busch. So yeah, St. Louis is definitely a beer town.
Stuart, this place is gigantic. It feels like it goes on and on and on, and I'm seeing another doorway
Yeah,
here.
well, we're gonna go down there. So the Cherokee Brewery Company used to be the entire city block from Iowa Avenue over here to the west to Ohio Avenue to the east. And so the only remaining structure is the one we're in. It was the stock house where they would age beer. But we are gonna go into some lagering cellars that are underneath the old brew house.
So this is the edge of your building here.
Yeah, right here, yeah.
And this goes underneath the lot next door,
Yeah.
or the building next door.
Exactly.
That's nuts. It goes on and on. Watch your head.
Watch your head. Oh my.
I'm also noticing it keeps getting deeper and deeper.
Right, we're about 25 feet underground, and it is a not quite frosty 63 degrees in here year round, and that's really important in brewing. That's the low 60s is a really good temperature for lager fermentation.
Right.
And you can see here we have these vaulting. So when you have a big long tunnel like this is known as a barrel vault, and when you have barrel vaults that meet at a 90-degree angle, you have what's known as groin vaulting. So welcome to my groin vault. Yes. So yeah, this was a really stable form of underground construction. If you worked here in the 1870s, your job would have been to come in here with a little kerosene lantern, because there's no electricity, and you would have taken beer from the ventilation shaft right here from the brew house, brought it in giant casks, and stored it down here to ferment. Or you might have moved it down to the set of lagering cellars that are underneath us that the shaft is currently filled in.
So there's another room.
There's an identical set of
beneath
these
us.
down there, yeah. And you would have put beer down there with big blocks of ice from the upper Mississippi River or the Great Lakes, and it would have been about 40 degrees, and you could cold age the beer and keep the beer really cold.
So that's how they stored beer before refrigeration. Fill caves up with ice.
And it's a process known as lagering.
So is this part of the Cherokee cave system?
It is. Caves are interesting because when people say that caves are connected, it's not like you can just walk through the cave.
Right.
It's if you can do a dye test, you can take dyed water and put it in at one point, and you can trace that dyed water at another point, that means the cave is connected. But yes, this is all connected to the Limp Brewery and Anheuser-Busch down the street.
Okay. And they also use the cave system for
They very
lagering and all of
intensively
that
use
as
the
well.
caves, yes, correct.
So what is this hole behind me?
That was either an old material shaft for bringing stuff out, or it used to lead to the sewer, and on the off chance that it led to the old sewers, we decided to quit digging.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, currently we don't really use this space, we just keep kegs down here.
Okay.
And so an interesting thing about this, you can see the fill right here in the sub-basement. This was another set of these lagering cellars, but St. Louis had an ordinance on the books in the 1800s that if you demolished a building and you had big basements like this, you had to push your demolition fill down into the basements because they didn't want to have building collapses.
Ah.
So when we took this building over, it was full to the ceiling of rocks and debris and bricks and clay, and we dug it out with shovels and wheelbarrows.
Wow, by hand.
Yeah, by hand. Everyone that worked here, plus about 25 day laborers, had shovels and wheelbarrows. We had a conveyor belt in the other basement, so we would shovel to the conveyor belt. It would go up to a dump truck, mini dump truck loads.
Did they get a beer after that?
And we paid them, and they all got beer as part of it.
You told me a bit of a story earlier
Yeah.
about how you explored some of these passages on a kayak.
Yeah, so we actually have a sub-basement over under our regular basement that's another 20 some odd feet down, and there's a natural spring down there. There was about 4 feet of water in there, and we kayaked it. And my architect and I went down, and he used a flashlight and pen and paper, and I paddled him around, and he mapped the entire, it was like Dungeons & Dragons, he mapped the entire thing.
So a lot of these caves were at one point natural, but then they've been heavily altered.
Which the presence of any human in a cave alters the cave.
Very cool. So much history down here. Well, Stuart, thank you so much for the tour of your brewery and your underground cave system here. It's incredible. Really is.
You're very welcome. Thank you for making the time to come visit us.
The legacy of beer brewing and lagering that started in caves under Cherokee Street remains the foundation of the craftsmanship at Earthbound Beer.
If you're in the St. Louis area, be sure to come visit while you still can. Unfortunately, Earthbound Beer will be closing its doors permanently on December 9th of this year. But until then, tours of the basement are still offered on Saturdays, so don't miss your opportunity to sample some truly unique beers and to see a piece of brewing history before it's gone forever.
Also, be sure to check out our extended interview with Stuart on our Patreon page. Links for everything can be found in the description.
Special thanks to Stuart and Earthbound Beer for hosting us and showing us an interesting part of St. Louis's history.
Stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ooh. It bites back.
That's good.
We're on a live camera, dude. That's a good thing they're not shooting with film. We'd be burning dollars.
So what I do love about this space is that when you walk in, there's a couple different levels. Yeah. So
Sam,
up here,
come in here and start opening. This place is disgusting.
This is a family-owned business.
It definitely is.
I love it. No, I feel like when you come in, you're welcomed as part of the family.
Yeah.